Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar titled Meet Compliance Goals in Biobanking with Ease. I'm Kanti Chatterjee, Assistant Marketing Manager at CloudLIMS.com. I'm here to moderate this event. Ms. Martha Hernandez is joining us today as a presenter. She is working as a scientist at CloudLIMS.com. I have been working with her for the past several months. Martha is a chemist with expertise in diverse areas of analytical chemistry. She had worked as an analyst at a licensed third-party analytical lab where she focused on developing and validating analytical methods for bioequivalence studies. Later, she served as a quality control expert in the analytical domain and as a monitor in clinical trials. Her interest in the clinical industry led her to be a part of two of the biggest hospitals in Mexico, where she gained expertise in hematology, microbiology, and blood banking. Later, she became a member of the team of forensic chemical experts and started working from day one as a specialist in narcotics and drugs. She had participated in multiple oral trials, defending her legal opinions, and worked as an expert consultant. She delivered a talk on the importance of ISO 20387 accreditation for biobanks at the A2LA Tech Forum 2022 and LabRoots Lab Automation 2022. She had also worked on natural products in France and presented her work at conferences in the USA and France. She received awards and accolades for her exceptional work. Martha holds a bachelor's degree in clinical chemistry from the Faculty of Medicine UANL and a master's degree in pharmacy from the Faculty of Chemical Sciences UANL, Mexico. Martha, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few points so that you know how to participate in today's webinar. All attendees are in mute mode throughout this webinar. This is an interactive webinar, so we encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. You can post the questions in the chat box. The questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We will take as many questions as the time permits. We do want to keep today's presentation on time, so if we are unable to answer any of your questions today, we'll answer them via email. It's time now to hand over the floor to Martha. It's over to you, Martha.
Thank you, Myrna. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Martha Hernandez. As Myrna says, I'm a scientist at CloudLIMS, and today I'm going to tell you how to meet compliance goals in biobanking with ease. So, in this talk, we will cover the importance of regulatory compliance. We will talk also about the major compliance and best practices. We will see some regulatory framework across the globe, and I will give you tips to meet compliance with ease with automation. But first, let's talk about biobanks. Well, in the last 2 decades, the demand of high quality for biospecimens has exploded. Now more than ever, there is a great need for biobanks that can meet the needs of modern research, and especially in fields such as proteomics, genomics, and clinical research. Biobanks play an essential role in biomedical research by collecting, processing, storing, and distributing high-quality biospecimens and associated data. And, logistically speaking, this could be a nightmare because all the samples and data must be kept safe and secure all the time. The staff must be capable of ensuring their safety and to protect the privacy of donors and also to demonstrate their competency. So, biobanks must abide by regulatory guidelines. Well, another major challenge for biobanks are the biological samples by themselves. Most of them, or maybe all of them, are temperature sensitive and may be affected by change in humidity or light or oxygen levels. So the biobanks must build infrastructures and deploy monitoring systems like freezers, for example, to maintain this quality in samples. So biobanks also need to track their samples through their life cycle to avoid problems such as misplacing samples, for example. So the increasing complexity of biobanking includes regulatory compliance concerns. So biobanks face a dense patchwork of compliance challenges here. So this includes like ethic committees, scientific boards, or and HIPAA, the GDPR, or the European legal framework, and numerous other compliance requirements. But what are compliance? Well, those are set of laws, regulations, and guidelines that a biobank needs to follow. And this regulatory compliance acts as a moral guide to ensure that a biobank is legally and ethically competent. So this applies to all types of biobanks, like commercial biobanks, third-party biobanks, or in-house biobanks, and they are governed nationally or internationally too. So biobanks needs to follow regulatory compliance and best practices. But why this compliance important? Well, first, to standardize operations in order to reduce variations in the process, and with this, of course, maintain high quality fit for purpose samples. Also, to safeguard protect health information of sample donors and support collaboration across the globe and build trust within the biobanking community and among researchers. And this is really important because researchers must ensure that all the samples have been properly collected, stored, and maintained through their life cycle. And they will ensure that all the experimental data coming from these samples for our biobanking are reliable and can be published in any journal without any question about their integrity. So now let's go to the negative end. Let's imagine that we do not comply with any of these rules. In case of non-compliance, I'm not going to lie to you, the consequences can be dire. And not only with the privacy of the patients can be at stake, but the biobank may also be exposed to additional damage. And some non-compliance risks are non-standard workflows. Well, all our processes will have enormous variations, and that will to the second risk, that is compromise of the sample quality. So our samples, we will not know what happened with them. So we will not have any quality on them. Legal and ethical issues, because we will not know how to manage the patient information, the data, the privacy of them. So we will have legal issues. Have to find some penalties. We will see some of them later in this presentation. Loss of reputation. The researchers will be passing the word and will say that our biobanking doesn't have quality in our samples and they are not reliable, so not for our biobanking. And one of the worst will be license cancellation. So the end goal of biobanking is to maintain high quality samples without compromising patient privacy and safety. So let's take a look for different biobank regulations around the world. Let's start with the HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of '96. These set standards to protect sensitive patient health information, PHI. All the technical, administrative, and physical safeguards must be put in place to ensure that HIPAA requirements are adhered to. So the entities that are covered by HIPAA are referred to as covered entities, and they include all the biobank staff and their business associates. So some of the important HIPAA compliance requirements include assigned role-based access permission to the staff. Also to encrypt data transmission and data security, and maintain an audit trail to PHI exchanges. We will see that later in this presentation. Too many requirements, right? Well, can a biobank successfully navigate through the complex regulatory jumble? Well, the answer is yes. With a Laboratory Information Management System, or LIMS, biobanks can easily comply and follow best practices. We will see that a little bit later in this presentation. So now let's see another compliance, and this is the 21 CFR Part 11 that was issued by the FDA on 1997, and this stipulates how records should be handled in electronic forms, as documentation or in signatures, for example. Well, these allow the widest possible use of electronic data. And the 21 CFR Part 11 ensures also that personal information in electronic form is always protected, especially in this time when all with the pandemic and all that happened in the last 2 years. Well, this has enforced it to have all the data in electronic form. So this protect all this electronic data for our patients. So the biobanks administrators can leverage informatic tools such as Biobanking LIMS to force staff to authenticate key biobank activities through digital signatures, and they can specify the reason for those activities. So this provides an additional layer of data security and prevents any chance of unauthorized changes. So with the LIMS, you can force your staff to authenticate and to put a reason of why they have access to this sample. So this is another layer of security, and you can comply with this compliance if data issues with LMs. So now let's talk about another type of compliance. Look at Europe. The European Union General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which came into force in 2018. This has increased regulatory oversight. This GDPR is a European standard that regulates how biobanks collect, store, and use biospecimens, and all the data of the European citizens too. It is considered the toughest privacy and security law in the world. And even though this is a European law, it imposes obligations on all entities that deal with related data for European citizens. So the violations of the GDPR will bring harsh fines and penalties that could be for millions of euros. So the GDPR also places restrictions on the cross-border transfer of personal data outside the European Union. So these materials can only be transferred to countries that implement similar standards to protect the privacy of the subjects, as well as the rights and freedoms. So there are 7 principles that stipulates how data should be collected, stored, or processed in accordance with the GDPR. And the first one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. These values must be respected with respect to personal data. The second one is purpose limitation. The data must be processed in accordance with the legitimate purpose for which it was collected, not anything else. Data minimization. The biobank should process only the amount of data necessary to achieve the intended goal, not more. The accuracy. Biobanks must ensure the data accuracy is maintained in every time. Storage limitation. This personal data should only be stored for as long as necessary, not more. Integrity and confidentiality. These values must be respected in relation to the personal data. And the accountability. The biobank is responsible and must be able to demonstrate its compliance with data protection principles through appropriate records and measures. So, an informatic tools, an informatic solution like LIMS enables biobanks to meet these GDPR requirements by limiting access to data, for example. Is maintaining records in all processing activities, providing a full audit trail. We will know exactly with date and timestamp who access to the sample and why it access to the sample. And we can ensure that the data integrity is maintained through the entire biospecimen and data life cycle. So also, a good LIMS anonymizes sensitive patient data and limits the personal health information access only to authorized staff. Mask data that can only be viewed by the authorized personnel. And every time an authorized personnel views or make changes in this VHI, well, the activity is recorded in an audit trail. So this is really useful in audits because sometimes the external auditors can request an audit report of PHI at any time. So the LIMS make it for you automatically. Now, let's talk about ISO. This is a new accreditation program for biobanks, and this is the ISO 20387 that was published by the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, in 2018. So this specifies the technical and quality requirements for competence, impartiality, and consistent operation of biobanks. And it covers all requirements for all aspects of the biobank management, including structure of personnel, facilities, processes, equipments, and it covers also the quality management system and sample handling, including all the processes from collection to distribution, and traceability of all these materials. And well, there are numerous standards around the world that differ from country to country. So an ISO homogenizes these rules and allows biobanks to be evaluated under the same standard. So inside the ISO 20387, we have a very similar structures to other ISO standards. We have a section for general requirements, and this touches the impartiality and confidentiality of the biobank. The biobank must be responsible for the impartiality and shall not allow that internal or external pressures compromise the impartiality and the confidentiality. So it also talks about the structural requirement. This is all about your staff, and you have to specify the responsibility, authority, and interrelationship of the personnel who manage all the activities on your biobanking. There is a section that is for resource requirements, and it touches the personal training and competence. It is important to manage your staff training and ensure that only trained personnel handle samples, data, or hazardous chemicals, for example. The facilities. You must include procedures to maintain fitness for the intended purpose, the biosafety and the biosecurity for the biological materials and data. And something that is very important is the separation between areas to avoid cross-contamination. There's a section for equipment, maintenance, and calibrations. Older biobanks have need to have their SOPs for the use and operations of all relevant equipment and maintain the calibration and maintenance up to date. There is another section that is for process requirements, and these are procedures for all the process in the biobank for collection, reception, distribution, transport, preparation, preservation, and storage, and of all the biological material and data. Also, the traceability of the specimen. You have to know where exactly are, and validation and verification of methods. For example, when it's necessary to splice samples to make aliquots, well, there have to be methods that previously were validated and verified. And then there is another one that is quality management system. It's the section 8, and this is all the control of documents and records. And also, you have to identify the risk and opportunities in your biobank and take corrective actions following non-conformity outputs, internal audits, and quality management review. There is everything in the ISO section 8. So now let's see another compliance, that is the International Society of Biological and Environmental Repositories, or ISBER. This plays a crucial role in ensuring that biobanks store samples that meet an appropriate standard for quality research. So this ISBER provide guidelines to biobanks on a collection, a storage, a specimen tracking and retrieval, document control and management, equipment calibration and management, distribution, shipping, samples, inventory management. So meeting these ISBER best practices requires a lot of documentation, such as SOPs, staff training and competency, equipment maintenance, sample procurement, sample and inventory procurement, and informed consents of patients. There are a lot of documents for these best practices. Also, voluntary, these best practices ensure ensure the availability of high quality biological samples for current and future research. So it's highly recommended to follow these best practices. Now, let's see how LIMS can help you with all of these requirements for ISBER and ISO. First, to managing and locating store samples. 2, about misplacing them. Well, a LIMS mirrors storage inventory and helps biobanks locate store samples with ease. Furthermore, it generates a report of all empty locations in a freezer, enable optimal utilization of freezer space. So you can see exactly where your samples are, in what freezer, in what shelf, in what box. You can store them, or you can save the space for them even before you receive it in your facility. So LIMS can do it for you. To managing documents, LIMS manage all internal and external documents, such as SOPs, consent forms. This also tracks the revision history and controls access to confidential documents. So you can make sure that only the updated version, the latest version of your SOP, is in the system, and you will avoid any confusion with your staff. Speaking about the staff, LIMS can help you to manage your staff training. This can manage records of past, ongoing, and upcoming training of each staff involving in all the activities of the biobank. And you can maintain a record of the staff qualifications and their competency. And additionally, the biobank managers can notify the staff about upcoming training and generate custom training reports. So you can make sure that only your staff that it's competent can handle this task. You will only assign the task for the staff that is competent and that have passed all the training, not anything else. Now let's see something about the National Cancer Institute. This institute supports cancer research in different ways. And the National Cancer Institute publishes the best practices. And these are a set of international use guiding principles for biobanks that addresses ethical, scientific, and operational considerations. These recommendations can be adapted depending on the scientific needs and do not cover detailed laboratory procedures. So these best practices were created to assure the quality of biospecimens that are intended for cancer research and the associated data. And well, these are voluntary, like the experts' best practices. However, all biorepositories involved in cancer research should follow these practices. So you see all the compliances, all the guidelines, all the best practices that are for biobanking. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of requirements. So I told you that the LIMS can help you to make your life easy and to make your biobank really better for to comply these regulatory guidelines. So I will mention you a checklist to choose biobanking software right. So a good LIMS must securely manage samples, data, and patient consent, all your documents. Two, assign role-based access to authorized users to safeguard and protect health information. Anonymize sensitive patient data. Also needs to store your SOPs, control documents, and records digitally and securely. A good LIMS must track your samples and maintain a chain of custody. Also manage to staff training and their competency. And LIMS can help you or should help you to schedule instrument calibration and manage maintains data, maintain an audit trail, and force authentication of key activities through digital signatures to know exactly why they access to that samples, and optimize freezer management and sample utilization. So there are many benefits for a LIMS, and there are many benefits of if you choose a LIMS, a cloud-based LIMS. So for example, not upfront investment. So you don't need to invest in hardware such as servers or networks or hiring IT people, for example. Automatic data backup on multiple servers. So this make disaster proof. Enhanced data security and privacy controls, real-time data sharing for collaboration, and rapid stability to meet the changing requirements. It's moving really fast, this industry. So now, finally, let's look at the key takeaways. We saw an overview of regulatory compliance and best practices for biobanks across the globe. We also saw how informatics helps biobanks meet compliance and follow best practices. And we saw also the key benefits of a cloud-based informatics tailored to biobanking. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here with the questions.
Thank you, Martha, for the informative presentation. I request all attendees to please take a moment to fill out the survey that you see on your screen. We are now going to begin answering questions. As a reminder, you can still submit questions to the chat box. We have some interesting questions, so I'll move straight on to these. The first question is, we have recently purchased a temperature monitoring system for our in-house biobank. Currently, we are not using a LIMS. Is it possible to integrate it with a LIMS?
Well, it depends on whether your LIMS vendor supports instrument integration or not. Different vendors adopt different integration methods, such as file-based integration or API-based integration, for example. So before choosing a LIMS vendor, it is important to confirm if the vendor provides such services. So you can also check with them if the associate cost and the timeline required to do this integration. This is really important. So, speaking about integration, this is had several benefits. For example, you can automate your collection of temperature and monitoring data, centrally managed data, and analyze it to gain insights of temperature fluctuations in your instruments. You can also set alarms if the temperature is out of range and send out notifications to the designated personnel to fix it and take measures to prevent their recurrence, for example. So yes, integration, it's really important for your biobank. So choose a good LIMS to have this.
Okay, thank you, Martha. The next question is, I would like to publish the samples that we have available for research. How can we do that?
So, well, there are two different ways to publish the sample data on specimen marketplaces. You can post the data manually. However, it will be time consuming, it could be tedious and error prone for the personnel to do it. So, if you have hundreds of samples in your biobank, a LIMS can help you to automate this. So, it could be a process easy. Labs can be integrated with the specimen marketplaces to automatically post the samples data directly from the LIMS to a marketplace, so saving a lot of time and a lot of effort for all your staff. A LIMS also can generate a searchable web catalog that can be published over your company website, for example. This is really good. So a LIMS can do it this all for you.
Great. So the next question is, I use an on-premise LIMS. I'm considering switching to a cloud-based LIMS. However, I'm concerned about security. How secure is the cloud?
Well, this is a great question. I get this question very often. So, well, most of the cloud based LIMS vendors host the LIMS in a secure cloud environment. Some leading cloud providers, such as Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, devote huge resources to assure data security at all times. So, most of these cloud service providers ensure that they have AWS ISO 27001 certifications, built-in firewalls, encrypted data storage and transmission using advanced encryption standards, and daily backups. So, hence, this data in a cloud-based LIMS is highly secure. Furthermore, a cloud-based LIMS eliminates the needs to buy expensive IT resources, such as hardware, and enable users to access the product 24/7 from anywhere, anytime. Only you need a device with internet. So the LIMS vendor needs to assure that their application is secure by FTA. I mean, TFA, two-factor authentication, use of Active Directories, SSO, and encrypting data at rest, and should have ISO and SOC2 certifications. So that's the thing that you have to check when you are choosing a LIMS vendor.
Okay, great. So yes, we do receive such questions from several
Perfect.
biobanks. Yeah. So attendees, you still post your questions now. So we'll just wait for some more time to see if there are any other questions. You can reach us offline also. You can reach us via email if you have any questions. Then you can definitely send your questions by email. Our email address is support@cloudlims.com. So uh, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
So, Martha, I see one more question. So the
Okay.
question is, um, how can I get ISO 20387 accreditation?
Well, you have to access to the certification body, and well, There are a lot of things that you have to do to get this certification, and a LIMS can help you to do it. So you can check first with your certification body, then you have to get an internal audit to check what are your workflows and how this can be managed in be good with the ISO 20387 accreditation to see what improves you can do with your workflows. And it's really good to get help for someone to do an assurance with this, and to audit internal to check what things can you do better to get this ISO 20387. And ALIMS can helps you very well to this, as we saw at the talk. And if you have any specific question, please don't hesitate to email me, and I can give you all the tips that you need to do this certification.
Thank you again, Martha. So our email address is support@cloudlims.com. You can note it down. You can send your questions by email as well. So let's see if there are any other questions. We have some time left. Okay, since there are no further questions, so we are going to end today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.